When most people think about space adventure movies, the first name that usually comes to mind is Star Wars. But before George Lucas created his galaxy far, far away, he had his eyes on another hero, Flash Gordon. Back in the 1930s, Flash Gordon comic strips and serials were a sensation, full of rocket ships, strange planets, and fearless battles against evil forces. Lucas grew up watching these serials, and they shaped his imagination as a child. By the time he became a young filmmaker in the 1970s, he wanted nothing more than to bring Flash Gordon back to the big screen. After the success of his film American Graffiti, Lucas went straight to King Features Syndicate and tried to buy the rights. Unfortunately for him, the rights had already been taken by the Italian producer Dino De Laurentiis. Lucas even tried to negotiate, but De Laurentiis refused. That single rejection quietly changed the entire history of cinema. Lucas decided to create his own space story, which turned into Star Wars in 1977. If De Laurentiis had said yes, the most famous sci-fi franchise of all time might never have existed. Ironically, when De Laurentiis finally released his own Flash Gordon movie in 1980, it ended up being overshadowed by Star Wars, the very project born out of rejection. In many ways, Flash Gordon became a symbol of what happens when ambition and timing collide in strange ways. What should have been a groundbreaking film became an odd mixture of campy visuals, chaotic production, and behind-the-scenes battles that still fascinate fans decades later. Another surprising fact about Flash Gordon is how close it came to being directed by one of the world's greatest filmmakers, Fellini. Fellini, the famous Italian director, grew up reading Flash Gordon comics as a boy. In fact, during the late 1930s, when Mussolini banned American comics in Italy, underground copies were still made, and some say Fellini himself secretly wrote and drew versions of those stories. Whether or not that rumor is true, Fellini always spoke with passion about Flash Gordon. In his own 1976 book, he even wrote about how much the colors and imagination of those comics inspired his films. So, when De Laurentiis offered him the chance to direct the 1980 Flash Gordon, many thought it would be a perfect match. But Fellini declined, leaving De Laurentiis furious. Instead of moving on quietly, the producer found a petty way to insult him. In the final movie, Princess Aura has a small pet named Fellini, a creature played by actor Deep Roy. This wasn't meant as a tribute, it was a dig. By naming a tiny, obedient character after Fellini, De Laurentiis left a permanent insult hidden inside the film. This story shows just how personal and strange movie productions can get. Decisions were often driven less by creative vision and more by ego, competition, and grudges. De Laurentiis was determined to prove he could make something as big and successful as Star Wars. But his choices often reflected anger rather than careful planning. Instead of focusing on storytelling, he rushed production, hired and fired directors, and clashed with actors. All of these issues would later show up on screen, making Flash Gordon both fascinating and frustrating to watch. Fans love it today for its campy charm. But behind the glittering sets was a storm of chaos. When most people think of space adventure movies, the first name that comes to mind is Star Wars. But long before Luke Skywalker ever appeared on screen, there was Flash Gordon. This sci-fi hero began in 1934 as a comic strip and later appeared in exciting black-and-white movie serials. The character inspired countless kids, including a young George Lucas. After Lucas found success with his 1973 film American Graffiti, he wanted to bring Flash Gordon to the big screen in color and with modern special effects. He approached King Features Syndicate to buy the film rights, but he was too late. The rights had already been taken by Italian producer Dino De Laurentiis, a man known for big, flashy productions. Lucas tried negotiating, but De Laurentiis simply wasn't interested. This rejection ended up shaping film history in an unexpected way. Instead of giving up, Lucas decided to create his own space saga. The result was Star Wars, which exploded onto the scene in 1977 and completely changed cinema. If Lucas had gotten Flash Gordon, Star Wars might never have been made. And in a twist of irony, when De Laurentiis finally released Flash Gordon in 1980, it was completely overshadowed by Lucas's masterpiece. What should have been the crown jewel of space fantasy cinema ended up remembered more for its strange production stories and campy tone than for its success. The story of FlashGordon also has surprising connections to one of the greatest filmmakers in history, Federico Fellini. Fellini was famous for his colorful, dreamlike films such as La Dolce Vita and 8½, and he had loved FlashGordon comics since he was a child in Italy. During the late 1930s, when Mussolini banned American comics, underground copies still circulated, and rumors even suggest Fellini secretly worked on some. Whether true or not, Fellini always spoke about how FlashGordon shaped his imagination. In 1976, he even wrote about wanting to use the bright, comic-like colors of the strip in his own movies. When Dino De Laurentiis offered him the director's chair for FlashGordon, it seemed like a perfect fit. But to De Laurentiis' shock, Fellini turned him down. The producer was furious and decided to get revenge in a petty but very public way. In the 1980 film, Princess Aura has a small pet creature that appears in several scenes. Its name, Fellini. The character was played by actor Deep Roy, and the name was not a tribute. It was an insult to Laurentiis' way of mocking the director who refused him. This kind of ego-driven decision showed how much pride, grudges, and personal feuds shaped the film behind the scenes. Instead of focusing purely on creating a strong story, De Laurentiis often seemed more concerned with proving himself and showing that he could rival Star Wars. This attitude would eventually cause major problems during filming, leading to clashing visions, chaotic decisions, and a final movie that looked dazzling but often felt confused. The problems with FlashGordon really began once production started. De Laurentiis fired the original director, Nicholas Roeg, after a year of preparation. Roeg had wanted to make a darker, more surreal version, but De Laurentiis didn't like it. Sergio Leone also turned down the film, saying the script did not respect the comics. Eventually, Mike Hodges was hired as director, but only 3 weeks before filming began. Hodges later admitted he felt like he was walking into total chaos. The script kept changing daily, so actors often didn't know their lines until minutes before shooting. The tone was never consistent. It swung between campy comedy and serious sci-fi drama. Screenwriter Lorenzo Semple Jr. admitted later that they could never agree whether it should be funny or epic. This confusion shows in the final movie, which has colorful sets and over-the-top acting but never quite finds a solid identity. Even worse, De Laurentiis micromanaged everything, often overruling the director. This created tension on set, especially with lead actor SamJJones, who eventually clashed so badly with the producer that he walked off before filming was finished. That decision alone would cause one of the strangest problems in movie history. FlashGordon's own voice, not belonging to the actor who played him, SamJJones seemed like the perfect choice to play FlashGordon. He had the classic comic book look, blonde hair, a muscular build, and a heroic jawline. But, in reality, Jones was not a seasoned actor. Before the role, he had been a semi-pro football player, and even posed for Playgirl magazine under a fake name. He beat out actors like Kurt Russell and Arnold Schwarzenegger for the part, but his inexperience soon showed. On set, he clashed constantly with De Laurentiis, and their disagreements sometimes became physical. Eventually, Jones left the production before filming was completed. Because of this, the studio had to use stand-ins to finish his scenes. Worse yet, when the film was edited, most of Jones's dialogue was replaced. His voice had been completely dubbed over by other actors, mainly Peter Marinka. For decades, audiences had no idea that almost none of the dialogue belonged to the man they saw on screen. The truth didn't fully come out until years later, when it was revealed that multiple voice actors had been stitched together to create Flash's final voice. Even Jones himself admitted he was shocked when he discovered how much of his voice had been replaced. For fans, this was one of the strangest twists of all. FlashGordon's hero didn't even sound like himself. It was almost as if the character had been pieced together from different people, making the star both present and strangely absent at the same time. Behind the flashy visuals of FlashGordon was a world of discomfort and even danger for the cast. The film's designer, Danilo Donati, created massive sets and more than 600 costumes. They looked beautiful on screen but were tortured to wear. The Hawkman wings, for example, were so heavy and sharp that actors couldn't sit down between takes. They had to lie flat on the ground like injured birds. Ornella Muti, who played Princess Aura, wore costumes so tight and complex that she needed help just to stand or walk. Max von Sydow, who played Ming the Merciless, had a costume that weighed over 70 pounds. Casting for Flash Gordon was one of the strangest processes in Hollywood at the time. Dino De Laurentiis wanted someone who looked like a perfect comic book hero, but the auditions were chaotic. Before SamJJones got the part, several big names were considered. Kurt Russell was offered the role, but turned it down, saying the script felt silly. Arnold Schwarzenegger auditioned, but his heavy accent was seen as a problem. Even Sylvester Stallone's name came up briefly, though he was already tied to Rocky. Eventually, Jones, an unknown with a strong athletic build, was chosen, but his inexperience created constant friction. For Princess Aura, Ornella Muti was picked because De Laurentiis wanted an Italian star. She looked stunning on screen, but she barely spoke English at the time, making her role difficult. Max von Sydow, a highly respected Swedish actor known for serious films, surprised everyone by accepting the role of Ming the Merciless. He admitted later that he mainly took it because the paycheck was good. The mix of new faces, international stars, and inexperienced actors created a cast that looked amazing, but often struggled with performance and communication. This odd combination only added to the movie's chaotic energy and explains why so many scenes feel mismatched in tone. Behind the glittering sets, life on the Flash Gordon set was far from glamorous. Because of the tight schedule, shooting often ran late into the night. The studio in London where they filmed wasn't well ventilated, and the heavy lights made the temperature unbearable. Actors wore costumes that trapped heat, so dehydration and fainting were common. Extras sometimes collapsed during long shooting days. The Hawkman scenes were especially nightmarish. Actors were strapped into harnesses and wires for hours, dangling above the ground in painful positions. Because the wings were so large, once strapped in, the actors couldn't move or take bathroom breaks. Crew members sometimes had to lift them down with cranes just to let them rest. The wires themselves weren't always safe. One Hawkman actor reportedly fell several feet when a rig malfunctioned, narrowly avoiding serious injury. Makeup was another nightmare. The metallic paints used on faces and bodies caused rashes, while Ming's elaborate prosthetics took hours to apply each day. Brian Blessed later joked that he felt like he had actually lived in the Hawkman kingdom by the time filming was done, because of how long he spent flying and shouting in costume. For the cast, every day was exhausting. But many also admitted it was unforgettable, like being trapped inside a bizarre circus of glitter, danger, and exhaustion. At the time of its release, critics were not kind to Flash Gordon. Many dismissed it as childish, overly campy, or simply a mess compared to Star Wars. American audiences especially didn't know what to make of it. But in the United Kingdom and Europe, the reaction was warmer. The film's flamboyant costumes and bold colors appealed to fans who appreciated style over realism. Over the years, this divide only grew. By the 1990s, Flash Gordon was being rediscovered by a new generation who saw it not as a failed blockbuster, but as a cult